Hi, my name is Chris Parkhurst. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm also the host of the Documentary Life podcast, a show that spans 140 episodes, has been downloaded in over 135 countries, and I've been producing for about 5 years. I decided to put each and every episode up here onto YouTube to sort of expand the audience, and as we say in the show, maybe inspire and inform some more doc filmmakers, hopefully like yourself. In the episodes, you may find some older, maybe outdated URLs, in particular any of the documentary filmmaking courses that we do offer online. If you have any questions about the URLs, simply look in the show notes on this page, here on this YouTube page, and that'll be able to take you where you need to go to. Other than that, I hope you enjoy the show, and it's great to have another listener to the Documentary Life. Have a great day. Microphone check, 1, 2. CC, hello and welcome. CC, hello and welcome.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells by the seashore. There we go, rolling. Hello and welcome to another episode. This one's episode 8 of the Documentary Life, a show where we set out to inspire and educate each and every one of us on how to best lead and live our own documentary lives. I am your host, Chris G. Parkhurst, and you may notice that I have I may sound a little differently this week. That is due to a severe respiratory issue. I'll get into that in a little bit. But you'll have to forgive me because, I'm going to sound a little differently. I have definitely been under the weather the past couple of weeks, but you know what? There was no way I was gonna let this pass by and miss an episode for you guys. It's important that I keep this commitment, so here I am. In fact, it's really kind of the first time I've been out of the house with any sort of duration. So bear with me, and I appreciate y'all coming back and listening to another episode of the Documentary Life. Before we get into today's topic, which is going to be about how to finish the film, I'm actually going to tell you a little bit of a story about really what put me where I am today in this sort of state of non-health at the moment. About 5 years ago, I was living in a tiny apartment here in Portland, Oregon. And if anybody's spent time here, I'm sure I have a number of listeners who live here. They know it can be pretty damp and wet throughout a big chunk of the year. And when you're living in a tiny studio apartment and you're living in this sort of weather and you're in an apartment building that, has been constructed, say, 80 to 100 years ago, the walls are virtually just cement. And it was in a constant state of needing to be sort of cleaned up. Paint would be peeling off of the walls. Like I said, the sort of cement would be chipping off at all times throughout the 4 or 5 years that I lived there. Another unfortunate part of living there that would happen in the walls was mold would be growing. And it did not mix well with me. I had a severe sort of bronchitis-esque episode in the final year that I was there during, the last winter that I was there. And I was laid up in bed for parts of 6 weeks. And man, did I feel bad for my neighbors because it's not typical coughing. It was hacking. You would think that if you heard me coughing, you would think that I'd been a smoker for 20 to 30 years. And towards that last of the 6 weeks, I was having to sleep at a 45-degree angle just so I could breathe. My lungs just were not getting a break at all. And I remember distinctly, it was a Saturday night, Sunday morning, and I've woken up or probably haven't really slept much at all to begin with. And I'm coughing all night, hacking, and it's hurting my chest and it's sore to the point where I'm struggling to catch oxygen. I can't breathe. And at the time, I had no health insurance, and that's a whole other issue. And so I was bound and determined not to go into the emergency room. I gave up at 6 a.m. when I could barely breathe. And it was so bad that, pardon me, there's a cough right there. It was so bad that I had to call a taxi cab because I didn't trust that I would be able to drive to the hospital. And trying to, I'm communicating to the taxi cab driver, because I can barely speak, because I can barely breathe, that please get me to the emergency room as quickly as possible. And he could see by the look on my face that it was serious business. And so he blew through red lights on the way to dropping me off at the emergency room. Make a long story short, basically what has happened since then is I now have this condition where if any sort of agitation is happening, whether it's a cold, like a simple cold can bring this on now, or if I'm laughing at the night before, anytime my lungs can get agitated this way, and I now have to have an inhaler on me during those times, or I maybe end up in a position like I'm in now where it just agitates the lungs so much that I continue to cough and it continues to be difficult to breathe. So quite a situation or condition that I have now. I forget exactly what they call it, but I'm not asthmatic, but things can trigger asthmatic symptoms or conditions in me. So that's a little bit of the backdrop of what in the heck has been going on with me the past couple of weeks, and why I almost was unable to do today's podcast. But alas, I'm here, and this is probably the longest already that I have spoken without coughing in almost 2 weeks. Now, to today's topic. Okay, actually, we're going to take a little break, take a sip of I was going to say tea, but it's not even tea. It's water with some lemon. So I'm going to do that, and then we will get into today's topic. Okay, we are now moving on to today's topic, which is about how to finish the film. And it's inspired by an email. You might remember a few episodes ago, it was probably episode 4, where an email from a listener had asked about finishing their film. They had shot the film and had been sitting on it for quite some time, and they just seemed unable to, or unmotivated to be able to finish the film for one reason or another. And I've received a couple other emails since then, which has led me to today's show, where I'd love to kind of examine that a little further. And again, today's topic is about how to finish one's film, and the presumption here is that your film is pretty much shot. It's either principal photography is finished, or you've shot at least the majority of the footage for the film. So this focuses more on truly how to finish the film in sort of that post-production phase, or pretty damn close to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline 5 of what I think are some of the best ways to help finish your film. And let's call these the rules of persistence. So these are the top 5 rules that I've kind of outlined today on how to help you finish your film. So here are the rules of persistence, starting with number 1, which I call visualizing the finish line. And in our instance, being filmmakers, why not visualize the finish line being the big screen? It's important to visualize this idea of a finish line, this idea of seeing your film on the big screen. And you know what? You don't have to visualize it being on the big screen. You might visualize it as video on demand. You might visualize it as being distributed for public broadcast consumption. You might visualize it being at a bunch of film festivals, okay? So it doesn't have to be on the big screen. I will use the big screen as an example because it's something that I used to help me when I was doing the Nepal doc, Journey to Kathmandu. It's important to visualize the finish line, because if you don't have that idea of what the finish line is, it can become problematic. It can slow you down. You have to have, it's kind of like setting goals, which is going to be another one of our rules of persistence. You have to have a finish line. In any sort of race, you have a finish line. When we trained for the half marathon, when Steph and I were training for the half marathon, even from the first day when we ran our first mile or our first 2 miles, that the first few weeks of training can be the hardest time during that training. But something I always kept in mind was, yeah, sure, today is a mile, or today will be 2 miles, and it might be a struggle just to get through that. But I know the longer that I do this, suddenly that 1 mile or 2 miles will become easier and easier. And the longer that I do this, and the farther out that I see, the farther out that I visualize, in this example of a half marathon, 13.1 miles, if I'm visualizing that, the 13 miles, even while I'm doing the first day of training, I know in my heart of hearts that yes, this is the first day of training. The mile alone, the first mile, is difficult. But I know that the longer I do this, the closer I get to that finish line. And so I found for me in filmmaking, when I would visualize the big screen, I visualized sitting in that audience. I pictured in my mind what the film looked like up on a big screen, projecting back to an audience. And honestly, I was doing this way before, even in some ways before the filming even commenced in Nepal, because it was sort of my way for training, right? It was my way of training for that half marathon. In this instance, it was my way of seeing that film through, because I wanted to know even early on what that feeling was going to be like, because that feeling early on was going to help propel me forward continuously every single day. Visualizing the finish line, in this instance in filmmaking, visualizing on the big screen, visualizing it on public broadcast, visualizing it distributed to television, cable TV, visualizing it however you want, but seeing where your film is going to go, it's super, super helpful. And I can't encourage it enough. Visualize that finish line. Number 2 in the rules of persistence. Number 2 on how to finish your film is setting goals. You've got to set goals. In this instance, because we're kind of presuming that the majority of the film is shot and maybe you've sat down and you're editing, I'm going to use the example of breaking the edit down into chunks. This is something that I've done for years, and I certainly did it with Journey to Kathmandu. I did it before that with Year Zero, and before that with Bomb Hunters. I'm doing it now with our current film project, Elvis of Cambodia. Breaking the edit down into chunks. If you don't, what ends up happening, and this definitely happened with me to Journey to Kathmandu, is I tried to edit the film. I tried to put it together sort of as a whole, instead of breaking it down into smaller, achievable chunks. Because of that, because I tried to edit the whole film at once, it became way, way too overwhelming. And honestly, I didn't even realize it for the first probably 2 years that I was trying to cut this thing. And I was constantly beating my head against the wall or the table, and I couldn't figure out what was keeping me from being able to edit in a way that was far more efficient than I appeared to be doing. And at some point, I scrapped the idea of editing the whole film, and I broke it down into chunks. I broke it down into 10-minute segments of the film. And honestly, once I started to do that, once I started to sort of set the goal of this week, I'm going to edit this 10-minute segment. This is going to be the segment where the goats are in the mountains and we meet the goat herders and we follow the goat herders through the mountains. This is going to be this 10 to 15 minute segment here. By the end of this week, that segment, that chunk will be finished. And no sooner did I do that than suddenly a month later, I had, the majority of the initial assembly edit cut for the film. And honestly, it took me 2 years to get to a place to come to the decision of, okay, I can't edit this as a whole, as one piece of film. I need to break this edit down into chunks. Once I set those goals, I was golden. Now, number 3 is recovery time. We all need some kind of recovery time, meaning to sit down, in this case, to sit down in front of your computer and to begin editing and to edit straight through for 10, 12, 15 hours a day, and to be doing this 5, 6, maybe even 7 days a week, and doing this, constantly for a month, 2 months, 3 months, suddenly a year has gone by, and you're constantly editing, you're constantly cutting. What happens is that you become so consumed with the project that you no longer can see the forest for the trees. If you're constantly working so hard on one thing and you become consumed with this, in this instance, with the story that you're editing, right? If you've been consumed with it, say for 6 months to a year, and that's all you've done, and it's been nonstop, you really risk being able to have any sort of perspective. You need to take a break. You need recovery time. In the game of hockey, you have line changes, right? There's 4 lines in a game of hockey. There's a reason that 30 seconds is generally your max for your top line, and a line has to come off and you do a line change, and the next set of guys come out. And then there's recovery time. You have probably a minute and a half before you're going to come out and do your line again. There's a reason for that. You need a break before you can come out, and then you can perform optimally once again. You've got to have time to recover. In filmmaking, it's no different. You remember I talked in episode 3 with filmmaker John Perozzi, the director of film Don't Think I've Forgotten. You might remember in our conversation, Perozzi talked about another film called Sleepwalking Through the Mekong, which he did in the middle of filming Don't Think I've Forgotten, a film that took him years to finish, and he needed a break. And in sort of his way of taking a break was to create another smaller, totally different project during the time that he was working on Don't Think I've Forgotten. That small project was Sleepwalking Through the Mekong. I do recommend it highly. Of course, Don't Think I've Forgotten, we've already talked about in the show. Recommend that as well. My point here is John needed some recovery time, right? And that was his way of getting some recovery time. So I can't tell you how important it is to make sure that you build in some kind of rest. It's, this happens in life all the time in any sort of different ventures. If you don't have some sort of recovery time or some sort of plan to get some sort of rest and to sort of break things up a little bit, then you totally lose perspective. And it's only going to hurt your film in the end. Number 4, kill the distractions. And I know that a great number of all of us from time to time sort of have this problem. So kill the distractions. It could be anything from the internet. It could be the TV. It could be just your way of procrastinating so you don't finish your film. There's nothing that's going to keep you from working or finishing your film more than distractions, and they're everywhere around us. We might want to watch a hockey game or football game. We might want to play some games with our friends. We might want to go out and socialize, which of course we have to have that recovery time. It's important to do that. But when you're doing it all the time, then you're really just filling your life with distractions, right? You're keeping yourself from finishing your film, finishing the task at hand. So it's important to constantly be reminding yourself, what are the best uses of your day? What are the best uses of your time? There is a personal development guy, and every once in a while I'll bring up, personal development because I do think that it has some merit. I don't want to push this on anyone by any means, but from time to time I might bring up somebody. In this instance, there's a guy by the name of Brian Tracy. I don't remember the name of this particular subject or program, but it was something that I heard 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it totally stuck with me. And it was essentially just about how to manage your time. I mean, maybe if you Google Brian Tracy best ways to manage your time or something of this, and maybe I'll find out what it is later, and I'll post it on the website at thedocumentarylife.com. In the show notes. And basically what he talked about is he finds ways to break down your scheduling day to day and break down what's important to you, and you outline and you label things A, B, C in order of importance. And basically the idea is you don't finish a C task when you can do a B task, and you don't finish a task that you've labeled B when you have an A task. Anyhow, look it up. It's actually huge for me. Basically what it's doing is it's scheduling out your time and it's maximizing your time. It's killing the distractions. Again, number 4 is kill the distractions. Number 5, belief in yourself. What is your self-image? What is your inner dialogue? I've hinted on the show about this, that's something that I've struggled with over the years. I've struggled with it personally, and I've struggled with it professionally, what my own inner dialogue is, what I'm telling myself. Professionally, there have been many times over the years where maybe I see on Facebook or I hear from a colleague that, another colleague is doing this great commercial they're working on, or they're doing, they're over in Nicaragua and they're working on this really cool documentary and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly I'm comparing myself. Well, how come I'm not in Nicaragua doing the documentary? How come I'm not being called to direct this commercial? I can totally do that. And suddenly that inner dialogue becomes a negative thing, and you're talking negative about yourself. And it's important at all times to really, when you see that happening, reverse the course, because you have to believe in yourself. It's important what your self-image is. There are many of you out there who are maybe even first-time documentary filmmakers, or thinking about delving into the world of documentary filmmaking. And I've said many times, you're not wannabe filmmakers. You're not wannabe documentary filmmakers. And I'll never say that. I'll say maybe you're a first-time filmmaker. But the most important thing is, I'm going to say you're a documentary filmmaker. And you should tell yourself that all the time. And you should never doubt that. That's going to help manifest these good things. That's going to help propel you forward. That's going to help the belief in self. Now, I also have listeners who have been working in documentary for 10, 15 years, and I've talked to some of them on this show, and you can tell in the manner that they talk that absolutely they have a belief in themselves, and they have a belief in their project. So maybe I'll throw that in there as well. It's important to have a belief in your project. Because if you don't, then why should somebody else? And more importantly, with this whole idea of belief in self, if you have a positive image of yourself, that's what you're going to project to others out in the world. That's what you're going to project onto your work. And yeah, there's nothing more powerful than positivity. And I preach that all the time on this program. Again, belief in self. What's your inner dialogue? Make it good stuff. Make it positive stuff. So that's the 5 rules of persistence. Those are 5 ways that I believe can help you finish your film. And certainly when you're in that area of you find yourself stuck and you're not able to move forward in it. I've been there. We've all been there. I've got emails to prove that a number of you guys have been there. This is not an uncommon thing. But I want to see you finish your film. And we've talked about this before. We had John Perosi on here in episode 3, and he mentioned it, that not a lot of people finish their film. Filmmaking is not an easy thing to do. And I want to maybe through this program and through the networking and supporting that we have in this program, I want us to all empower us and inspire one another to see our films through. Again, 5 rules of persistence that I've come up with to finish your film. Number one, visualize the finish line. Number 2, set goals. Number 3, recovery time. Number 4, kill the distractions. And number 5, belief in self. Now, a final thing that I'll say is, in filmmaking, in particular in documentary filmmaking, where so much of what we do can be on our own at times, especially if you have smaller or minimal, budgets at best, the temptation is to go it alone. It really is. So much of Journey to Kathmandu I did on my own, to the detriment of my health, to the detriment of my well-being, to the detriment of the film. And the temptation is to go it alone. Don't do it. Reach out. Seriously, reach out. Find someone who will hold you accountable. And I did this in, Journey to Kathmandu at a pretty integral part. Year 3 of the editing of that, I brought in a very good friend and mentor of mine, Bird McDonald, and he gave me some advice after watching a version of a rough cut, probably like the 8th version of a rough cut at that point. And it was huge what he told me. It freed me from some of the shackles that I had built over the course of 3 years by doing the film just on my own, by editing it only myself. Without his few words of very powerful advice, I might not have broken out of that, or it might have taken 2 or 3 more years. Who knows? Find someone who will hold you accountable. Find someone who can just even offer a word of encouragement. And this could have been another Rules of Persistence. I don't know. This was just an add-on that I thought of while I was recording this, because it was super, super helpful for me. And I hope that it'll help you avoid some pitfalls. So again, the temptation is to go it alone naturally, especially when we're doing these doc projects, and especially if they're lower budgeted. But don't do it. Surround yourself with people who can give you encouragement and some insight along the way, or just a pat on the back, even just some encouragement. It can be super, super helpful. All right, I made it through it. Thank you for bearing with me. And as always, thanks for coming out and listening to the podcast again. Without your encouragement, without your emails, without your energy, without you listening to this show, it doesn't exist. Again, thank you so much. And if you get a second, and a few of you have been doing this now, and it's actually helping increase our numbers and our visibility on iTunes, go to iTunes or your podcast app and go ahead and give us a 5-star rating if you like our show, and write a quick review. It'd be very helpful for us. I mention it at the end of every show, and if you listen to other podcasts, they do the same, but there's a reason for that. So, and then that reason is it increases our visibility. It increases the potential for our listenership, and I need that. So I would be super grateful if you could do that. Thanks again for listening to The Documentary Life. I hope that this has been another episode that has helped inspire and educate you a little bit more onto how to best lead and live a documentary life. If you'd like some more information on any topics of the show, if you need to go back into the catalog and listen to some past episodes, go to the documentarylife.com website. It's all there, all of the episodes. The blog is there as well. Show notes, and anything else. And also, you can email me directly at chris@barangfilms.com, chris@barangfilms.com, or if you go to the website, you can subscribe there and or write to me from the website. Any of your thoughts, any of your ideas, anything you want to share with me on how I can make this show better for you and better for our audience, I love to hear those suggestions. Please, by all means, constructive criticism is highly encouraged. Also, if you've got some stories, some filmmaking stories that you want to share that you think would help educate or inspire other listeners, please send that. So again, the email is chris@barangfilms.com, or if you go to the website, thedocumentarylife.com, there's a way to send a direct message from there as well. Thanks again, and I can't wait to talk with you guys again in 2 weeks. Thanks again for listening to the show, and remember to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, remember, for any of the URLs that may or may not be outdated and you want to get the most up-to-date information, perhaps for the documentary filmmaking courses, for the blog, for other episodes, just go ahead and check in the show notes below on this YouTube page, and that'll give you the correct URLs to use. Thanks again. Have a great day.